Ah, g'day mate, 40 here. So finally got my gimbal. So taking my gimbal for a walkabout here. 75 degrees outside in Los Angeles. I'm dropping the headset. Just the pure crystal sound of an iPhone 12. So spent about $80 on this gimbal Steadicam. Let's see if we're getting our money's worth. Is this baby worth it? So is the picture, say, more stable? Okay, let's move the, whoops, no, let's move the camera. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's pretty cool. Oh, this new technology. I was pulling my hair out this morning trying to learn my gimbal. This took about an hour, but I learned that just gotta make sure it's connected to the Bluetooth and then everything starts working. So it feels a little funny walking around with this gimbal stick. Seem more organic just holding the phone. But I'm curious what the viewing experience is like. Is it worth it here to have the gimbal give like a steadier picture without it jumping around, all this special technology? Wow, that sun's behind. Okay, so Academy 1900 to 1940, The Dynamics of Intellectual Assimilation by Suzanne Klingenstein. So really top book, mate. So EB, how do you like my new gimbal Steadicam? Is it providing a superior viewing experience? So universities really started in England, I believe, around the 14th century, Oxford and Cambridge, and then had them developing in France and Germany. Blissful, okay. So blissful quality with the Steadicam, taking this live stream to a whole new peaceful, easy feeling. You know I won't let you down. So first Jews who became university professors in Europe and in the United States, they had to be converts to Christianity. So there was this one Jew who converted to Christianity and got a university teaching post, and he was asked by his fellow Jews, what was it about Christianity? Was it the beauty of the ritual? Was it the sublimity of the theological teachings? Like, what was the advantage? And he said it's better to be a university professor than a Hebrew teacher in a yeshiva. So how would you compare the sound quality? So when I had my iPhone 7, I used that ridiculous looking headset. And so now I'm using a gimbal, no headset. Can you notice a decrease in sound quality, just the same, or possibly even improvement? So the first Jewish professor in the United States at Harvard, he also was a convert. Okay, audio quality is just fine. So the first Jewish professor in the United States at Harvard, he was also a convert to Christianity. So the universities started out, whether in Europe or the United States, as essentially theological seminaries. They were training grounds for clergy. So obviously it would be ridiculous to think that Jews were going to become professors at a theological seminary for Christians. But as the universities became more secular, and as the nation states became more secular, then it provided more room for Jewish advancement. So when France and Germany and England were dominantly Christian nations, even the United States, then that's going to put limits on how far Jews could rise. But perhaps in a more secular America, like, Jewish advancement's just a lot easier. Whoa, 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 whoa. I still got it. So, generally speaking, Jewish groups in the United States tended to be uncomfortable with Christianity in the public sphere. And so the people who introduced the Ten Commandments, not the Christmas video, really. So the people who introduced the Ten Commandments to the world, as Dennis Prager notes, also the first people to loss of dignity, such running. Also, somebody driving by, is that Luke Ward? So the people who introduced the Ten Commandments to the world were also the ones who are leading, taking it out. My God, it's a beautiful day here in Los Angeles. Let's catch this walk sign. I should have brought the little tripod. Okay, I still got it. I still got it. Jesus saved me. Whoops. Okay. Fancy a shrubbery, mate? Get you into lovely shrubbery. Nothing like a good shrubbery. And I love LA. What a beautiful day. LA is not dramatically beautiful like San Francisco or Chicago. It's just kind of got much more of a low-key beauty. It's just very pleasant. It's warm. So Northern California, summers tend to be blistering hot. Lots of folks driving back from church. Yesterday I bought a Tim Hill beanie with Bluetooth headphones sewn in. Interesting. Oh. So I really like this book by Susan Klingenstein, Jews in the American Academy, 1900 to 1940. A lot of good stuff in here. So last night we left off on the section, an adamant rationalist, Morris Raphael Cohen. Now I can listen to Luke while cottaging. Great. Zionism versus the Enlightenment, Callan versus Cohen. So Morris Raphael Cohen was the philosophy professor, and he was going up against Horace Callan on the issue of Zionism. So Morris Cohen based the policy of assimilation, which would make the salvation of Jews and non-Jews depend on the progress of the slow movement known as Enlightenment. So overall, Jews have been quite in favor of the rationalist Enlightenment as being. Traditionalist Jews have been much more skeptical about the Enlightenment because it reduces the power of the community. So traditionalist Orthodox Jews kind of opposed to the innovations of Napoleon, and they tended to support the Tsar. Well, most Jews appreciated the Enlightenment. Now, the Jewish Enlightenment was called the Haskalah. So names of these professors come up in The Price of Whiteness, Jews, Race, and American Identity. Yeah, I just downloaded that book today, so I'm looking forward to reading it. Stable as a drone, excellent. So $80 was worth it. All right. So according to Cohen, the philosopher, The policy of assimilation was clearly expressed by Spinoza, pointed out that Jews, like other groups, are held together by the bond of common suffering, and that as the nations become enlightened and remove their restrictions against the Jews would adopt the habits of Western civilization, and the Jewish question would be eliminated. So this is essentially the same source that supplied Horace Kallen with his arguments for the advocacy of Zionism. So Kallen wanted the Jews to become a nation like any other nation. And Cohen wants the Jews to become a nation like any other nation, but very different paths. So Cohen essentially wants the Jews to assimilate, and Kallen just wants the Jews to become a nation like any other nation. Okay, so I can even, whoops, oh, gotta tilt that. Oh, pretty swift. So Cohen says restrictions against Jews have nowhere been completely removed. Witness the social restrictions against Jews among the supposedly enlightened citizens who form our university clubs. This makes the intellectual Jews particularly susceptible to the mystic and romantic nationalism. You think this particular framing is antiquated? I'm sorry. So this is interesting though. He thinks that intellectual Jews are particularly susceptible to the mystical and romantic nationalism which began in Germany as a reaction against the liberalism of the French Revolution, against the old faith and the power of cosmopolitan reason and enlightenment which overthrew medievalism. So this is interesting. This bloke Cohen, he says that intellectual Jews are particularly prone to nationalism. So he's claiming that nationalism began as an intellectual movement in France and Germany, began as a reaction against the liberalism of the French Revolution. So the mystical and romantic nationalism which began in Germany. So that's 19th century German idealism, right? German romantic nationalism, as opposed to the liberalism and enlightenment of the French Revolution. So for Cohen, Zionism was a romantic nationalism comparable in kind to the racist chauvinisms of Houston Stewart Chamberlain, who had a big influence on Adolf Hitler, and Mikhail Nikiforovich Katkov. So he's essentially comparing Zionism with National Socialism. Though this critique is about 20 years before Hitler. So according to Cohen, Zionism, nationalism are radically false, profoundly inimical to liberal or humanistic civilization. So generally speaking, universities are not in favor of nationalisms. So universities tend to be the least nationalistic places in the United States. So Cohen feared that a Jewish national idealism might have similar evil consequences. The idealistic Zionists are quite willing to ignore the rights of the vast majority of the non-Jewish population of Palestine, just like the Teutonic idealists with their superior culture. So I think that's interesting that Cohen compares Zionism with romantic German nationalism, and he's afraid that it'll lead to mistreatment of the Arabs and the Muslims. Academics live in the clouds, no attachment to place. Yeah, and also I think because academics are so much more comfortable living in an abstract world, that they spend much more time in the abstract than regular people, so that probably reduces their attachment to place. So to embrace an irrational movement. So nationalism is primarily non-rational because it's based on a feeling that you belong to a people which essentially functions as an extended family. So to embrace an irrational movement like nationalism to offset the effects of irrationalities resulting from an inadequately realized rational liberalism is futile or absurd, according to Cohen. So this is written around 1910. The stress of events such as the national idea in Europe and the resultant threat that the rest of the world will balkanize calls out loudly for the need for a refreshing faith in individual freedom and enlightenment. So Jews have often been big suckers for the Enlightenment, because if you're going to be a secular Jew, then the Enlightenment is pretty cool, right? Because the Enlightenment and liberalism is based on the idea that how do you keep the hat on your head? Is there some kind of adhesive? There is, my friend, double-sided tape, otherwise known as theater tape. So a few strips of double-sided tape and Bob's your uncle. So Jews are among the most fervent believers in the Enlightenment, because the Enlightenment posits that we're all primarily individuals who are born into the world with certain inalienable rights, that we get to choose our religion or lack of religion, that we get to pursue truth through rational inquiry, and we're not bounded by particular tribalistic or national allegiances. So most academic Jews, most intellectually inclined Jews, most non-Orthodox Jews have tended to be big fans of the Enlightenment. Now, in some sections of Orthodox Judaism, the Enlightenment has had an effect. Nope, not heading to synagogue, just out for a walk talking about philosophy. So the Haskalah movement was primarily a movement in non-Orthodox Judaism, but it did infect slices of Orthodox Judaism. So Orthodox Jews have become really good at leading bifurcated lives. Okay, let's see, what's the better framing? Okay, better framing might be Rome, the thing everyone has since tried to emulate in some manner. Okay, so Orthodox Jews often embrace the Enlightenment and rationalism and liberalism in some parts of their lives. Could Israel said to be the result of Hellenic influence over a long period of time? Well, Hellenism definitely influenced the Jews. The recent holiday of Hanukkah has been a reaction against Hellenism. So the traditional Jews took on the assimilated Jews and won. So Hanukkah was primarily not a Jew versus Greek battle, it was primarily a Jew versus Jew battle. And so in Israel today, you've got probably 60% of Israelis who are big fans of the Enlightenment. And wow, Aaron says, I'm trying to be Orthodox now, it's not taking. Okay, Aaron, let me give you the secret, whether or not Orthodox Judaism is going to work for you. And it's going to have nothing to do with what you believe. It's going to have nothing to do really with your practice. What determines whether or not Orthodox Judaism takes, or Christianity takes, is the number of friends you have at that institution. So if you find a synagogue, am I a big fan of the Enlightenment? I'm a moderate fan of the Enlightenment. Hanukkah has since been Hellenized, made a big deal in response to American Christmas. Yeah. So if you develop 3 or 4 good friends at synagogue, then your Orthodox Judaism will take. On the other hand, if you develop no friends at synagogue, your Orthodox Judaism is not going to take. So you go to church and you only have, say, 1 friend at your church, you're not going to last long at that church. So the primary thing that determines whether or not religion will take for you is the number of friends you have at that institution. So if you have, say, fewer than 3 friends at a synagogue or a church, you're very liable to move on. If you have more than 3 friends at a synagogue or church, you're very likely to last. Whether religion works depends on whether it gives you benefits. Yeah, well, it's really about people. It's primarily about the quality of the people who it brings into your life. So for me, as a single dude, no family, as I've entered Orthodox Judaism, I've experienced benefits of being adopted, essentially, by various families. And that's been a huge benefit in my life. No, it does not need to be a benefit, merely the impression of a benefit, a placebo. Well, yeah, you really need a handful of friends at a synagogue. If you've got a handful of friends, then you're going to stay there. If you've got a handful of friends at your church or at your synagogue, no matter where you shift to on the ideological spectrum, generally speaking, you will adapt your life to stay close to the people who are important to you. So if you love the people at your shul, then you'll fit in. You'll come to Torah class every morning. You'll keep the Sabbath. Okay, here we go. Try not to get run over. So we are on Wilshire and La Cienega in Beverly Hills. So everything comes down to the quality of the people. Sounds about right. Not the most compelling argument for the truth. I reckon it's easier to make friends at a 12th step than shul. Depends. So, yeah, for some people it's going to be easier to make friends at a 12th step meeting than a shul. The advantage of making friends at a shul is that may well turn out to be deeper. Like you've got an ethnic, racial connection, and you've got a holidays connection, a way of life connection. Now, 12 steps also a way of life. So, if you make friends in your 12-step program, then you'll also probably hang out there. So I was just talking to friends of mine in Brisbane, Australia. And so I was told about 5% of people wear masks. Religious entourage can backfire if they do not espouse a religion the way you expect, can lead to disillusionment and atheism. Yeah, I don't think most people really care that much about ideas. Now, obviously, if you're on this stream, you care about ideas. This is a very idea-focused stream. But I don't think most people care about ideas. Oh man, I forgot my mask. I might as well turn around. How did I leave the house without my mask? That's embarrassing. How much do I care about ideas? I care very much. But yeah, Sydney in total lockdown is lunacy. Yeah, so there are a whole bunch of new COVID cases in Sydney, Australia. Apparently they came over, some Yank on a flight over about December 1st brought COVID, and now there are about 20 cases and they can't fully trace it. So Sydney and New South Wales never shut down like Victoria and Melbourne did, but there was a flight around December 1 that brought in a bunch of COVID cases, and so Sydney's tracing and locking down. But overall, Sydney and New South Wales have dealt very effectively with COVID without having to shut down. Man, I can't believe it. I walked out of the house, I forgot my mask, I forgot my pants. This is embarrassing. How could I do that? Why have cases been so low in the developing world? I don't know. Probably because they don't have an others bunched as tightly indoors. Whoa. Seems to be an inverse relationship between temperature and catching COVID. So in lower temperature places seems to be much more COVID. Warmer environments, much less COVID. So I think that's a large part of it. The developing world also has fewer old people. Yeah. Okay. So Cohen's faith in the Enlightenment as a means of salvation and his power to solve the Jewish problem through its policy of assimilation was absolute. So Cohen was fine with Jews just completely assimilating. And so there are more Jews in the world. Give me the chat. Have to go to hospital. See you on tomorrow's stream. Okay, feel better, James. So there's a big temperature differential. Generally speaking, colder places have a lot more COVID, and places with densely packed public transportation seem to have a lot of COVID. So Australia and New Zealand are not much affected by the Spanish flu in 1918, 1919. They get off pretty lightly. And so too, they've gotten off pretty lightly with this round of COVID. So all of the early professors in this book, so that's Ludwig Lewenson on there, and then below him is Horace Kalin. Then at the bottom is Lionel Trilling. So Lionel Trilling, in 1939, he became the first Jew to get on a tenure track in an English literature department. So he got launched at Columbia. So initially in America, there was very little discrimination against Jews. Then the first Jews that came to America were Sephardi, and they were quite good at assimilating. Then you had an influx of German Jews, like the 1820s, 30s, and 40s. They became the majority of American Jews. Now, German Jews do tend to very effectively assimilate into the majority culture, but they didn't assimilate as easily as Lionel Trilling was bi. I didn't know that. So German Jews did not assimilate quite as easily as the... Watch out, Luke. There's Patrick Little. Quick, run. So you got your first major active forms of discrimination against Jews. Have you ever walked through Compton like you're doing now? No, I'm not a big fan of walking through darker, dangerous parts of town. I prefer Beverly Hills, West LA, Santa Monica. So after the Civil War, there was a major explosion in the economy, boom in the economy. And so in all the status competition that really came to the fore after the Civil War, then you had the growth of anti-Jewish sentiments. Because it was, according to this book, it was a way of maintaining class distinctions. And then in the 1880s, 1890s, you had this massive onslaught of Jews from Eastern Europe and from Russia. And so they poured into the United States in the millions. So in about 20 years, Jews went from about 0.5% of the American population to 3.5%. And then with that high Jewish IQ, they started pouring into the universities, and this was unexpected, right? They didn't expect Jews to pour into Columbia University, Harvard, Yale, etc. So around 1900, the turn of the century, started getting the growth of all these quotas on the number of Jews they would allow in, but they generally didn't want to be distasteful in the way they framed it. So they talked about things like character and being well-rounded. So sort of like how universities discriminate against Asians today. Talking about we want well-rounded people, people who are in athletics and extracurricular sports. We don't just want dull strivers who test well. This was mechanism for keeping the number of Jews low. And there was particular reluctance to have Jews teaching in English departments, because English departments were thought of as the literature of Christianity. And so Jews were obviously outside of that. So Anglo-Saxons dominated English literature departments in the United States and England And America was very much an Anglo-Saxon nation up until about the turn of the century. So the point of my show last night was a quote from Michael Walzer, Professor Emeritus at Princeton and international relations specialist. He said that the most decisive point in American history came in the 19th century when America, which was started as an Anglo nation, and was intended to remain an Anglo nation, but that desire was dropped, or it was overcome, and so Anglos in the 19th century, Anglo-Americans, allowed themselves to become the minority. And he said that was the most decisive point in American history. And so Anglos dominated in English literature for understandable reasons when America was a strongly Anglo nation. But then as America became more multicultural, they started allowing Roman Catholics and Jews. Over 70% of white American I think 85% of the members of the 13 colonies in 1776 were from England. Now the academia is Jewish. All academics are creating their fellow Jews in their respective field of study, one big Jewish bubble. So that was a guy blowing his horn to agree with you, Jim. Now, in the 1960s, you had the dropping of academic quotas against Jews in the elite American universities. And so you had an explosion of Jews into academia. And then with that, you had the entrance of LGBTs and people of color. So generally speaking, Jews in the academy would tend to be about 95% on the left. Where does this illusion of the American Anglo Golden Age come from? Well, it was true. America was created by Anglos. Its institutions have been Anglo, and Anglos dominated this country until the 20th century. So I'm afraid you're wrong. Okay, well, what are the statistics? Which of our institutions are not Anglo? Which of our institutions are not primarily Anglo, right? We had the jury system, we had common law, we had representative democracy, we had the congregational model for houses of worship. These are all Anglo institutions. What is the statistical representation fallacy? Look, I don't know how you can argue that our primary institutions are Anglo-Saxon. I mean, that's just demonstrably true. And when you look at, say, the 100 most important Americans of, say, the 19th century, they're going to be dominantly Anglo, which implies that the statistical majority dominates the culture, whereas the existence of Christianity ought to discourage you from that. Well, take the 100 most important Americans of the 19th century. You'll find that these were dominantly Anglo-Americans. Look at our presidents. How many Roman Catholic presidents have we had? How many Jewish presidents have we had? No, pretty much all of our presidents have been Protestant. To be continued.